This is a quick guide to completing the whole genome sequencing forms. It is important to ensure that all forms are completed fully and accurately to avoid any delays in processing your referrals. Let's start with the R14, which is a code for the Rapid Whole Genome Sequencing Test. This is done at the Exeter Clinical Lab, and you should find the relevant information and guides on their website. These cases should be discussed with the clinical genetics department so that we can approve those requests. You can get in contact with the clinical genetics team by phoning the on-call registrar or putting a referral in through our pool on EPR, which is Clinical Genetics (IP). Our team would recommend whether the R14 referral is suitable for your patient or not. Our clinical genetics team or your team can discuss the case with Exeter and get approval of that test. We will now go over the test order form and the record of discussion form, which is effectively the consent. Let's start with the test order form. You have to indicate the source of the referral. In this example, the referral is from PICU. It is important to note that each box is significant and should be filled out. Enter the patient's name, last name and date of birth, hospital number and their gender. Completing the NHS number box can be tricky. Use the space bar to skip spaces and black boxes. Otherwise, the number will get obscured in this black box. Tick the option to indicate whether your patient is alive or deceased. Choose the correct ethnicity and indicate the number of individuals referred. It is also very useful to indicate whether there is any consanguinity. Next, type in any clinical information and relevant family history in this box. Type a clinical summary, as this text, or an abbreviated version of it, will be included in the report. Next, we can complete the HBO terms. These are the terms that the lab will use to analyze and filter data. In the R14 test, completing the HBO terms is optional. Completing HBO terms will be demonstrated on the whole genome sequencing discussion. In this example, we put global developmental delay, tonic-clonic seizures, and developmental regression. The next box requires completion of parents' details. Type the parents' demographic details, date of birth, NHS number, gender, and tick whether they are alive or deceased, and whether they are affected or unaffected. The next section refers to the clinician details. Complete these boxes with the information of the clinicians involved. The pediatrician and clinical geneticist details are required. Emails ideally have to be an nhs.net email address so that the lab can send you the report. Complete the other contact details as well, just in case there are any questions about this referral.
The next section discusses completing a record of discussion for an R14. This is effectively a consent form. We need a record of discussion for all the patients involved in testing. So in a trio referral, 3 records of discussions will be required, 1 for the patient and 1 for each parent. Familiarize yourself with the contents of this document, as this is helpful when you go through it with the patient and the family. Complete the section about research and indicate whether the patient has agreed to have their data used in the research setting. Complete the next section with all of the relevant details. This is where adult patients can sign. This is where the parents or guardians sign on the child's behalf. If you completed the record of discussion, fill in the healthcare professional section with all the relevant details.
We're now moving on to completing the whole genome sequencing test order forms. You can download the relevant whole genome sequencing forms from the Birmingham website. Complete the requesting organization. In this example, we are using Oxford. The GLH lab is central and south. Fill in the patient's first name, last name, date of birth, hospital number, gender, and postcode. When completing the postcode, use the spacebar to get past the black box so that no details get obscured. Do the same for the NHS number. In this section, choose the correct ethnicity, life status, and whether it's a trio or singleton test. If it's a duo test, ensure that you place the number in the box provided. Complete the relevant clinical information. In this example, we included a brief summary of the patient's case. In the section regarding clinically urgent testing, we would recommend you speak to genetics if you feel like this is the case, so that we can advise you whether it's appropriate to tick the box or not. Pick the correct clinical indication or panel from the drop-down box. In this example, we're doing an intellectual disability panel. To find out which panel is suitable, we recommend checking the National Genomic Test Directory. On this website, open the PDF version of the document. Find the relevant indication and check if this meets the criteria. The National Genomic Test Directory covers the whole spectrum of genomic tests available, from targeted variant testing to whole genome sequencing, and specifies which tests can be offered for each clinical indication. You can also use PanelApp to search these panels and to find out which genes are involved. Going back to the test order form, complete the boxes regarding the age of onset. In this example, the child had seizures that started at age 1. Type any additional panels that you require. Again, in this example, we wanted the intellectual disability panel, but this patient may also be suitable for the epilepsy panel. In the penetrance section, tick the box to indicate whether the condition is complete penetrance or incomplete penetrance. Incomplete penetrance should be selected when one parent may be mildly affected or if a condition associated with incomplete penetrance is suspected. Complete penetrance is when both parents are definitely unaffected, or when the proband and affected parent definitely have the same phenotype, or the phenotype is caused by the same gene or variant. If a penetrance is not selected in the test order form, then a default penetrance will be selected. It is useful to state any rare or inherited diseases that are suspected or confirmed in this section. In this section, complete all of the parents' details, NHS number, whether they're affected or not, whether they're alive or deceased, and their relationship to the proband. The next section asks for the responsible clinical consultant, so in this example, we'll be typing the consultant that the patient is under, their address, their telephone number, and their email address. In this section, if you have completed the record of discussion form, you can tick this box and attach the copy yourself. You can say that the conversation has taken place with the record of discussion form to follow, particularly if you refer to our genomic practitioners team for the record of discussion. We will have a link to the email address at the end if you would like to refer to their team. You would just need to send them a completed test order form with a brief summary of the case and an insight into family dynamics, consenting capacity, and whether there's a social care worker involved. This section is where we fill out the HPO terms. Clicking on the forms link will take you to their website. Search for the relevant terms and symptoms. Ensure that you have the correct string as well. This allows the lab to analyze the data for you. In this example, we added global developmental delay, which is present in Tessa and absent in everyone else. Seizures tonic-clonic, which is present in Tessa and mum, but absent in father. There are some quite common HPO terms that we use for certain specialties, which can be copied from the bottom of the page. This is the record of discussion for the whole genome sequencing test. It is fairly similar to the R14 record of discussion. It is important to complete a record of discussion for each patient referred for testing. You will therefore require 3 records of discussions for a trio referral. Ensure that you complete all of the boxes with the information required. Once you do this on one page, it should automatically populate on the subsequent pages. On page 3, complete the section regarding confirmation of research choices in taking part in the National Genomic Research Library. The patient's signature box will need to be completed according to who the consent is for. For adults with capacity, complete the top section, and for children, adults without capacity, or deceased patients, complete the bottom signature box. Note that adults without capacity will require an extra consultee form to be completed. If the consent is obtained remotely, patients do not have to sign, and you can tick the remote consent box in the healthcare professional box below. Tick all the relevant sections within the healthcare professional box. Type in the responsible clinician and the hospital number. Finally, if you have completed the record of discussion, type your name and signature. You can sign PDF forms electronically using the Adobe Acrobat PDF Reader. The relevant blood forms can be found on the Oxford Hospital's website. Complete this form and ensure that you fill in at least 3 patient identifiers in this section. The referring consultant and relevant contact details should also be entered so the labs can contact you for further information. On the clinical details section, type a brief summary of the patient's case. This doesn't have to go into as much detail as the test order form, and you can outline which panels you want to test. For the test required, we type whole genome sequencing or WGS. The form will need to be printed and enclosed with a labeled sample. If we are doing a trio test, we will require samples from both parents and the proband. For non-whole genome sequencing tests such as arrays and small panels, you will need a blood form and a standard genetic testing consent form. After you know which panel you need, check the National Genomic Test Directory to find out whether the test required is WGS or a small panel. If it is a small panel, we will require the affected person's blood and the blood form with clinical details that meet the criteria for the panel. Filling in the R14 and general WGS forms should be straightforward if you have all of the information that you need. Providing complete and accurate details prevents delays in the WGS pathway. Remember to complete the forms electronically, as handwritten test order forms will not be accepted. Speak to clinical genetics prior to an R14 referral to ensure that it is appropriate. Use the National Genomic Test Directory to find your required panel and testing requirements. Use Panel app to check which genes are in the panel. Complete a record of discussion form for each individual referred for testing. And ensure that you collect the appropriate sample for all of the individuals put forward for testing, and that each sample is labeled with at least 3 patient identifiers. For any questions, contact the clinical genetics team.